want to go ahead and do some introductions. So we've got Mike Gualtieri from Forrester. He's guest speaking with us today. He's a VP and Principal Analyst coming out of Boston. And we also have Arijit Sengupta. He's the CEO of Aible, and he's been the CEO and founder of BeyondCore, which was acquired by Salesforce. So with that, I want to leave this poll up a little bit longer. We're getting the responses in as people log in, and then we'll get kicked off. Let me switch that on over, and I'm going to let Mike get started here with some of his slides.
All right, well, thank you, and welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm just going to switch over to share my slides, and then we'll get started here. Let me just confirm with my colleagues, you can see my screen?
Okay, slides are coming through. Great, Mike, thanks.
All right, very good. All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Mike Gualtieri, and I am VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester, and I specifically cover artificial intelligence, business use cases, and technology. So AI is firmly a strategy of most enterprises today. If it isn't, it should be. And it's gone beyond the experimentation phase into a phase where they want to implement use cases. So I want to share with you our research and more specifically some of the 6 hurdles to success for enterprise AI. So the backdrop of this is, what is the bigger picture of enterprises? What is their priority? And our data repeatedly shows that it's digital transformation, and that's really a proxy for enterprises being leaders in their industry, especially during this time of technological change. And it's a top priority for global enterprises. And that focus is not just about like generic survival, but it's about being leaders in their industry. And you can see here what they say some of those, what the requirements are, what they're trying to succeed at. You can see it's better customer service, better customer experiences. I mean, of course, customers are the lifeblood of every business, but also efficiency and productivity through technology. And what's interesting is that these requirements for digital transformation are actually also linked to the requirements that companies say they're interested in artificial intelligence. And we've also have survey results that show that digital transformation leaders now believe, maybe 60% of them believe, that AI is a critical technology for these digital transformations. So I want to talk to you during this webinar about some of those challenges and what we really mean by artificial intelligence. We believe it's fundamentally a technology for good. It's not really that different from any other, well, it's very different from other technology, but in terms of adoption, how we as humanity and as enterprises choose to use it. And the net is that we're already seeing the impact of artificial intelligence on many, many different industries. So Forrester's point of view on artificial intelligence, it's a net positive. Enterprises will use this technology to make customers, to satisfy customers. And when we ask specifically, what are those benefits? You can see they are aligned with digital transformation requirements, customer experience, increased automation of internal processes, efficiency, productivity. These are the very typical requirements of AI. And you might say, yes, this is not surprising. Actually, it is. Because if I were to do this webinar about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, people would say the thing that AI is mostly about is new products and services, or just disruptive new products and services. And you can see that makes an appearance. But what's good now is that now that enterprises understand AI, they say, actually, we can use AI to block and tackle as well for customers and for automation. So that's a good thing, and that will lead to its acceleration. And we believe at Forrester that AI capabilities within the software, that they will be they will underpin all applications, and they will leverage the real-time and data and insights from AI to make those applications more intelligent, and therefore make more consequential digital transformations possible. There are some unique challenges that exist, but most enterprises can overcome those very quickly. And what I've done here is I've picked out what we think are 6 of those top ones to think about. So the first one is recognize reality with data. And this really started in the era of big data, where companies want to be data-driven. And the data actually represents what's happening in the world. And everything is uncertain, and that is actually a certainty. And the only hope that we have of understanding it is to use data about the real world. And it's an essential to produce those good outcomes, especially with artificial intelligence. If you think about it, data represents those physical events that are happening throughout our business, throughout supply chains. It represents all of the digital events, the clicks, the mobile, the location. It represents when customers interact with us. Data represents what's happening in the market. It represents other business and operational events. And leaders must use those patterns in the data to make decisions about operations and customers today, but also using that data to predict about the future. And that's the goal here, is to use that data to turn uncertainty into some degree of certainty that can be used to exploit some of those opportunities. And what is the most powerful technology to detect patterns that we know of in the world? It's called artificial intelligence. And that's partially responsible for why companies are interested in this. But it's not going to predict things. It's not going to recognize patterns unless you use it to recognize those patterns that are important to your business. So the key point here on the first one is that this is not just about data scientists. I think perhaps the HBR did the world a disservice when they said, well, the data scientist is the sexiest job. Actually, they alone cannot do this. So it definitely takes a team of business people, just like building and using any other technology to make a real business impact. Chief data officers are essential in this, because artificial intelligence is fundamentally a data analysis technology. So it all starts from there, and that's critical. First step is to understand that AI is a data-driven technology, and that data represents your reality, and that's how you're going to make the best possible decisions. Now, the second one is you have to find those use cases. You have to find the use cases that matter, and guess what? This is one of the most frequent questions I get as a Forrester analyst, which is, well, what use cases should we do in our industry? This question is very easy to answer, and it's getting easier to answer every day. There are literally as many use cases as there are business processes, and that's because AI is about either detecting a pattern or making a prediction. And tell me a business process that wouldn't benefit from a prediction or pattern recognition. And it doesn't mean that it's going to work in all cases, but certainly those use cases can be surfaced. So before I go on, I think we're going to present a survey.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. We do have a poll for this on the use cases, so I'll share that. And while you're going over that, I want to share the results of the poll that we had at the beginning. So for people, we had 69% of people that are just learning and getting familiar with AI, and we had about 28% that have some models in production that have done some amount of AI, and then we've got about 8% of people that have several projects that they've done that are much farther along. So to give you a feel for where the audience is and some of your peers are for those on the call. So we're getting these numbers back, and just give it another 30 seconds here, and I'll close that out and share this. So far, it looks like supply chain is one of the most interesting ones. We see that. Predicting which deals will close is a second one. Multiples of you have several of these use cases that you're doing, which we see is pretty common. It's not just one use case, but like Mike was saying, there's so many. All right, I think I'm going to close the poll here. We've got most of the respondents back, and we've got 62% of people say supply chain is something they want to do, 15% for fraud, and 38% each for predicting which deals will close and customer churn. Thanks, Mike.
Very good. Yeah. Well, I'm glad those align with my slides. This is just a sampling of some of the use cases. Remember, artificial intelligence can be used to create a model that can predict something, right? So we might want to predict supply chain issues while we can still do something about it. Predicting fraudulent transactions is very consequential. Predict which deals are likely to close. Predicting which customers are likely to churn. Predicting customer propensity to buy, upsell, cross-sell. So these are just a smattering of those use cases, and all you have to do is get in a room with some business people and walk through, whiteboard a business process and ask yourself a question at every step of that process. Is there something, a pattern we could detect or a prediction we could make that would dramatically improve this process? Now, if you want to get even more interesting, you could say, well, look, if we can make this prediction or detect this pattern, is there a way we could actually change that process? So finding these consequential use cases is not hard if you walk through that, if you walk and look in your business processes. Now, the reason why we say consequential is because we're out of the experimental phase, right? And a lot of the technical people who are drivers of this technology have made up use cases with insignificant data sets. You want real. We're ready for real use cases now. The technology works on them. Now, the third thing is to insist on comprehensive access to enterprise data. You're not going to be able to develop AI if you don't have access to your enterprise data. Might seem like an obvious statement, but when we see, that's one of the biggest challenges companies have. And this isn't always a technology problem. Sometimes it's an organizational problem. But people have to understand, they talk about algorithms a lot, and those are important, but not without data. If you don't have the data, the algorithms don't mean anything. And if you don't have the right data, if you don't have access to the right data needed for the use case, that old adage continues to be true, which is garbage in, garbage out. Now, the good news about data is global enterprises have great sources of data, rich sources of data that a lot of the internet companies have, and this is all industry specific. So if you just look at some of this data, it's like, wow, when you start to drill down as to the breadth and depth of enterprise data, that's what is needed for successful AI, but you're going to have to make sure that you get access to that. And a large global enterprise that may have literally hundreds, sometimes thousands of sources of data, and you don't need them all for all use cases. You might need just 1, 2, or 3, right? So it's not like you need some huge project to break down every single silo, but you need to find a way to provide that access. Otherwise, it will slow down the process because people will be waiting for that data. So you need to provide quick and complete governed access to data for model building teams. Now, you may have heard that people wait around for data. Here's my observation. When we talk to companies that have been successful at AI, especially early on, it's when executives have gotten involved, like chief data officers, who instead of data science or business teams begging for that data, sending emails, could we have this, could we get this, could we get this? When that leadership comes in and says, could you please get them the data they need? Because this is a huge use case, really important to the business, that greases the skids and they get what they need. So algorithms, I always like to say algorithms get the press, but it's the data that actually leads to success. Now, the fourth one is to go faster with AutoML. This is my favorite. because it's the biggest change that we've seen in the last 2 years in this market. Now you may have heard, well, to do AI and to do data science, we need to program in R and we need to find R programmers or Python programmers. AutoML is changing all of that. The data science process is very, very iterative, and AutoML is an amazing tool. The analogy I give is with lumberjacks. A lumberjack with an axe can fell about 15 trees per day, 15 large trees. But there was a little something invented called the chainsaw. And with a chainsaw, they can cut down 400 to 600 trees per day. AutoML is the chainsaw of data science, and it's no less amazing in the orders of magnitude more productive that data science teams can be. But it also has a side effect of also enabling business people to also do this. And this is the traditional process. Identify the data, we talked about that, and then run statistical and machine learning algorithms, evaluate the model, and then deploy that model. So the point of AutoML is to automate sections of this, especially in the model building section there, because data science is a very iterative process. There isn't one major AI algorithm. There's dozens, and usually data scientists want to try those. So if they're coding it, they code it, they try it. They code something else, they try it. They code something else, they try it. AutoML takes all of the best practices and just puts them into one process. This allows data scientists who actually know how to do this become a lot more productive because their iterative cycles just become a lot faster. And they have the knobs and dials to do what they need to do. But it's also amazingly helpful for business people who may not know some of these terms, like what's a confusion matrix, or what is SVM, which is support vector machine. That's the type of algorithm, or feature engineering that has to do with the variables used to do this. People may not know those terms. They don't have to with AutoML. And it's not that it's going to not that business people can replace data scientists, because there's a little more to it than that. But there's many use cases that data savvy users and business savvy users can do with AutoML. So we strongly recommend that if you're trying to accelerate AI, look for products that use AutoML. The fifth thing here is to use an adjacent technology. This is my favorite. This is not AI technology per se, but it has a multiplicative power when used in conjunction with machine learning. And this is about optimizing the business outcomes with the models that you build. So just doing a machine learning model alone does not necessarily guarantee the best business outcomes. Remember, machine learning models are about prediction, they're about pattern detection. Well, what happens when you make that prediction? Now what? Now what do you do? So mathematical optimization, which is what I was calling math, it calculates the best use of your scarce resources, whether it's dollars, whether it's people, based upon those real world constraints. So let's go back to some of our use cases. You can use machine learning to predict that there's an issue while there's still time to remediate. That's enormously valuable to know that. But now what do? You can use mathematical optimization to calculate the least costly way to reroute shipments. Perfect use case for mathematical optimization. You can use machine learning to predict those fraudulent transactions, but then what? Well, now you have to calculate the cost of rejecting false positives or keeping them, or keeping the deal. You can predict which of those deals are most likely to close with machine learning, but now you want to calculate where should you put your people to maximize the revenue based upon those deals. You can predict with machine learning what customers are likely to churn. With optimization, you can calculate how many customer service professionals might be needed to minimize customer frustration. And you can predict the propensity to buy, but that doesn't mean you just want to give people coupons willy-nilly. You might have a budget, right? So calculate how many discount coupons to offer to maximize the revenue or maximize profit. Another important best practice is to use mathematical optimization technology. Look for products that include that, to use it in conjunction with machine learning. If you're just using machine learning, you don't have the entire AI solution. And the final hurdle I want to share with you is about keeping models fresh. Machine learning models work because they analyze data about the past. That data in the past represents what the environment was like in the past. Environments can change, and therefore the model can change. So you can build those machine learning models, but those model predictions can be imperfect if the situation changes. You might deploy that model, and then over time, that model will have negative value. That's unlike program and software code. Once you code it, it's going to run the same way all the time. Models are different. They have to be retrained, right? So it's not a negative that the model decays in performance. It just means that you have to retrain it periodically. So it's not like run it once and then it runs for years. No, you're going to have to retrain that. So also look for a solution that monitors the performance of that model against business goals, and then has an easy way to retrain that. ML models, just like us, right? If the world changes and we're behaving the way we behaved in the past, we're not going to be successful. We have to adapt, and so do ML models, and they do that by retraining it on newer data. We call this process model ops, and that's just a repeatable process to deploy the model, monitor it, and then retrain it at the necessary time. So if you can't deploy the models successfully, and this is another challenge we hear, then you're not going to get that business value. So AI is a hot topic among enterprises. We've seen it become a strategic initiative that's linked with digital transformation. So I hope you keep these 6 challenges and strategies for overcoming these challenges in mind as you embark on your AI implementations. We believe at Forrester that AI is a substantial technology, that it's the next stage of human progress. Think about the Industrial Revolution. Think about all of the mechanics, the machines. What do those machines do? They augmented our muscles. Artificial intelligence is a technology that augments our minds, and we're only just getting started with it. And enterprises can use that now for their digital transformations. Just pick the right technology, the tools and practices, and you'll be successful at implementing AI for your digital transformation. And with that, I thank you, and I'm now going to turn this over to Arjit. Arjit?
Thank you, Mike. Really appreciate your session. Hi, everyone. I'm going to take you through a few examples that Mike was talking about. And one of the things that we are very focused on, of course, is AI. It has gone from being one of the top 10 to being literally the top 10 investment priority right now. But there are several issues with it. For example, 65% of companies report obtaining no business gains from AI in the past 3 years. And this is from MIT Sloan and BCG. Gartner talks about how 75% of AI projects will stay in the prototype level, mainly because businesses and data scientists can't have the right conversation. But the problem here is, if you think of the entire team that Mike was talking about that has to come together to make these things successful, yes, you have the data scientists, data engineers, etc., but the business manager, the end user, they are not coming into the process, and without them, you don't get to business adoption. So how do we solve this problem of engaging the business manager and end user? Most of you have heard about something called explainable AI. It's a big thing that everybody's excited about. And this is what explainable AI is all about. Let's put a bunch of charts and graphs and then try to explain that to business. Are we even explaining this to business at this point, or are we just explaining from one data scientist to another? And if you think I'm being mean, let me give you a real screenshot of a real product from a company that has actually put this up as an example of how to explain a model. So they're not even being facetious about it. They genuinely believe this is the way to explain a model to a business user or to a stakeholder. Well, a business user or a stakeholder is actually asking for something very different. What they want to know is, if I adopt this AI, how would this affect my KPI? So if I'm in a sales process, how much revenue will I make? If I'm in marketing, how much of a profit in terms of generated pipe compared to expense will I make? If I'm in logistics, what would be my actual cost incurred to get all of my tasks done? So what a business person is looking for is that business impact. And that was what Mike was talking about when he was talking about AI and mathematics coming together. Now, they also want to understand what is driving that AI. Absolutely right. So that is our form of explainable AI, telling you what are the KPIs that are driving the predictive models. But more than that, there are going to be business assumptions. And in the current changing time, our business assumptions are going to change pretty rapidly. For example, what is my cost per click? What is my propensity of a customer to take up an offer? What is my average deal size in sales? What would be the cost of a spot purchase on a logistic shipment? All of these things are not only changing at this moment, but they'll continue to change on an ongoing basis over the next 2 years. So what business owners need to know is to say, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And they want to try out different assumption differences and see what the business impact would be based on those assumptions. Now, one of the interesting things you can do is you actually create different AI for the different scenarios. So think of it as creating an efficient frontier or a portfolio of various AIs that are optimal for different scenarios. But you don't just do the few scenarios that the user has laid in, you do thousands of potential scenarios extrapolating from the kind of things that the user thought was important for their modeling. But this is the power of doing AI and optimization together, where you can take those assumption differences and turn that back into business impact. Because now you're answering the question that business needed to know, which is, how will this AI help me? And the other interesting question might be, how do I balance my investment across groups? Again, Mike talked about this. How much money should I put into, how much resource should I spend on a process? So in this case, I have a marketing example. Well, the old mix was, say, 50% digital, 35% event. But we know right now my events might go to zero. So how do I look at the new mix given the new assumptions? And can I dial in the assumptions for the different types of marketing channel and see how this rebalances themselves? Now, these are very important topics. We're going to do an entire webinar on this in a week to walk you through how does this work in uncertain times. But I wanted you to understand two things. One is, how do you take predictive models plus mathematical optimization to explain the impact to business? And in fact, take it to end user feedback. Because what you can do is take these predictive models and push them out inside the applications your users use today, like Salesforce, like Marketo, like Tableau. And then you can see, what does the end user say? Does the end user say that this AI is being too aggressive? I'm getting too many leads, slow this down? Or does the end user say, I'm starved for leads, get more aggressive, give me more? That end user feedback can be incredibly informative for the business owner, especially again in changing times, because as Mike pointed out, AI is trained on data, and pretty much every AI you've trained on past data is now out the door because your circumstances have changed so much, and a new normal may not be established for a long period of time. So how do you make sure while your data catches up, while you get to the point where you have sufficient data on the new normal that your AI can fully be trained on it? Well, you can use this end user feedback cycle to start adjusting your business, seeing that, oh, in this geography, people are asking for more deals, whereas in this other geography, they're not. Well, that informs what we do as an enterprise. But building that trust and explaining the impact is not just at the manager level. You have to get it down to the end user level. So this is Aible inside Salesforce, where if you're looking at an opportunity, it'll tell you whether you should pursue the deal, the recommendation, but they can actually go in and change the aggressiveness of the model, which was feeding back into the previous screen we talked about, and see the risk-reward trade-off of their choice. That if they go very conservative, what they're really saying is, I want to focus on a fewer set of leads, but really do a good job. Think of it as a enterprise sales team. They want to focus on few good deals. On the other hand, somebody's on a commercial side, they would want many, many deals because they need to churn through it very quickly. Well, people don't fall nicely into those two buckets of enterprise and commercial. Everybody will have their own preference, and they can customize with just one slider. They can customize their AI for their unique needs and understand how their AI would be different from the organization's AI. And then at the executive level or the CDO level, being able to go in and see what was the economic impact of the AI projects you deploy. This is one of the most common conversations we have with CDOs. They don't have an easy way to even understand how much value they have created for the organization. Or as things change, as Mike pointed out, predictions are going to be wrong. You need to, when we talked about how you are integrating Aible into Salesforce, we get to see if we predicted a customer would buy and then the deal fell through, we get to see that because we are listening on Salesforce, observing what is happening. So we can figure out that, oh, shoot, we were wrong. You're not going to make your numbers. Or the behavior has changed so much, the market conditions that have changed so much that you will not make your numbers. But it can then come back and give you these recommendations and say, well, you might have a way to adjust for it. You could increase your digital marketing by 15%, or on the sales side, focus really on upselling because you're not going to get as many leads coming in from social media. So how do we change? How do we react? How do we take action in changing times? That is not, this is the CDO view, but that is also available to the data scientists, to the business owners. So we're going to do a whole webinar on this with Preston McAfee, the former chief economist for Microsoft, former strategic technology director at Google. He's a really impressive guy, professor at MIT, Caltech, etc., and an advisor to Aible. So we'll talk about this in a week, and I'm just going to focus on it in that session. Now, let's go back to the AI ML team we were talking about. These are all the stakeholders in the AI ML team, but every one of them have a very different need. And the second thing to keep in mind is when your team is this big, when your team actually has the end user, has the business manager, what you cannot do is have a one-size-fits-all strategy. You can't go in and say, I have this one tool, and guess what? Everybody can learn to use that tool. Because either you're going to be too simple for the data scientist or you're going to be too complex for the business analyst. You are trying to put everyone into the same square hole because that's all you have. What you really need is tooling that is focused on the unique skills and the unique needs of each part of this new AI ML team. So for the CDO, what are their number one, their chief concerns? I can't show any ROI from our investment in AI. And I've had CDOs talk about how this is a repeat of what they faced with Hadoop, where a lot of investment went in and then CEOs would start asking them, well, what was our ROI? And there was no good answer to that question. Well, Aible focuses directly on ROI in every project we do. We do that mathematical optimization that Mike was talking about to translate the predictive models back into the economic impact. We focus on delivering economic impact throughout, and we present it back to the CDO so they can see what happened. The second, they don't have enough skilled data scientists. Or imagine right now where most of your AI models will have to be retuned. You don't have enough people. But we have different tooling for different personas, and we're going to go into that in a second, which has massively reduced the amount of training needed by people to be able to be effective. Because we are not going in and telling them, learn this crazy tool. We are going in and saying, learn this tool that is really optimized to your needs. So the end user only gets one slider. They don't get 50 controls, but the data scientist gets all the controls they need. And the question of data. Mike talked about how important it was to get access to data. Well, two interesting parts there. One is we have this thing called Aible data that can quickly confirm whether an AI is good enough for a data set is good enough for training AI. Why is this important? because most of your data experts don't actually know how to set up data correctly for AI. So they often have to go to the data scientist, and you have this cycle back and forth where data scientist comes and says, no, this is not good enough, and they have to iterate through. Well, now the data engineer can do this. But secondly, the problem is that many of these guys are trained to clean data for BI. And the data cleansing requirements for BI are very different from the data cleansing requirements for AI. For example, missing data in AI, you can actually impute it quite often. In BI, that's going to throw your dashboard off completely. Think of it this way. AI is trying to learn common general patterns. BI is trying to give you precise numbers that you can agree on. So a data set that might be good enough for AI may not work for BI. Vice versa, a BI data set that is nicely aggregated out to a small summary table is completely useless for AI. The other interesting part of this is data security. Mike was talking about, insisting on access. Well, the way Aible data works is the data engineer who has provided this data, they have access to the data. But my data scientists, my business users, they can all train models on the data, but they don't actually get access to it. In fact, even Aible doesn't get access to your data because your data stays in your own AWS or Azure account, and all of the models generated by Aible are running in your account. So Aible doesn't get access to that data. Now, if I look at the data engineer, we talked about this to some extent, that they need to know whether the data is good enough for AI. They also get a lot of similar data pool requests with minor variations. So Aible has a way in Aible data for them to start tagging that data set with where the data came from, what does the data actually mean. So they can essentially create a data dictionary. And because the end users don't get access to the data, but they can train on it, they can now share this very, very broadly within the organization. Data scientists have a very different set of needs. They want to understand, how do I get business users to understand the value of my model? Because unless they understand the value of my model, the model is not getting into production and adopted. And this is where Aible Business and Aible for One, the end user capabilities, really help the data scientist. They also are concerned about models getting stale and doing the same thing over and over again. The way Aible works, it is actually observing what is happening with the data. So if in Salesforce, if we predicted somebody would buy, and did they buy, did they not buy? And essentially the data set for retraining is being created as monitoring happens. And the system can come back and say, hey, you need to retrain this model because the behavior has changed completely. Or, hey, you have a potential bias problem because, in your training data set, 30% of the population was female, but in your production data set, it's 80% female. So you may have a bias problem. Or it might come in and say, this subgroup in China, behavior is changing so quickly that you need to have a specialized model for China. All of that is being done automatically without preconceived notions by Aible trying out many, many scenarios rather than the data scientist having to go in and do those retrainings manually. And they also have to often do the same projects over and over again. This is where they can create blueprints where business users can take the blueprint and take the codified best practice and run with it, or they can even allow Aible business users to run splits off of an analysis they've already done. So for example, they might do a sales propensity to buy analysis for the entire company, but then the team from Brazil can take the subset of the data and just replicate that exact same thing the data scientist has done, including the data decisions, the modeling decisions, every kind of decision the data scientist took, just scale that to Brazil and Brazil alone. So that allows not the expert data scientists, but other people empowered by them to go in and run these specializations so that the data scientist doesn't have to do that. But remember, the data scientist still has full control because the data scientist gets to control what is the domain of models that get deployed. When business users interact with end users, interact with the models, they're interacting with a portfolio of models that have been blessed by the data scientist. And that gives that walled garden where the data scientist can protect the organization, but doesn't have to get involved in a reactive way with every project. Business managers we talked about, we are answering the fundamental question of how can I improve my KPI? How can AI help there? What will happen to my business under different scenarios? And this kind of scenario planning is crucial right now where people are trying to figure out what do I need to do in the changing circumstances. And They also don't want to invest millions of dollars and have months before they can see value because business managers need help right now. So we work on existing data. You don't have to do anything special to make it work for Aible. If you have it in Salesforce, we can just suck it out. If you have it in Marketo, we can suck it out. And when we say suck it out, we don't put it on Aible. We suck it out and put it in your own AWS account, your own Azure account in a secure way where Aible is not seeing the data. And in the span of just 3 weeks, we can walk you through that entire process and get a deployed AI up and running for you to see value. And that 3-week process is crucial because this can be done remotely without Aible getting access to your data. The business analyst has a different set of problems. They know that analysis, BI analysis was rear-facing, and they really want to focus on what's going to happen in the future. They need to stay relevant as AI becomes the new BI. But the skills they really have is the conversation with the business owners about assumptions, about what is the average deal size is something the business analyst will often know. What is the average time that a salesperson, that a support person spends on a call is something the business analyst will know. So Aible Business gives the business analyst the ability to retool and add value to the organization from the information they already have, from the information they already know how to get to, but in a much more scalable way, in a much more relevant way for AI. And for any and all existing dashboards, they can just plug in Aible right there. This is Aible for Tableau in a Tableau dashboard. But essentially what you're doing is inside a Tableau, inside a dashboard, you're giving the end user the ability to do what-if analysis, look at predictions, and even change the aggressiveness of their unique AI depending on whether they like or don't like the predictions, and they think the prediction should be more aggressive or less aggressive. The end user, they know that they have unique needs. One AI doesn't fit all because think of the simple example of commercial sales versus enterprise sales. Clearly, you would want an AI to be very aggressive in one case and very conservative in the other, but people don't fall into that kind of a nice two-bucket distribution. Everyone is unique, and they want to have that unique ability to make an AI specific to themselves. All of us have faced this when we look at movie suggestions on, by the way, a lot of us are looking at things like Netflix and Disney Plus right now, or looking at news articles. I always want to go in and say, hey, AI, be more aggressive. Don't just show me the movies you think I will like. I actually want to be surprised a little bit. So I might go and move the dial to the aggressive side and say, surprise me. Don't be so conservative. Where somebody else who just wants to watch a movie and wants to be absolutely sure they like the movie, they might want to go very, very conservative and say, give me a no-brainer. I really want to have a movie that I will really like. Now, the other thing that's happening is even at the end user level, they want to understand what the AI is doing and how it affects their job and their KPI. So once again, doing the same thing that we talked about at the business user level, but now at the end user level, saying how is their choice affecting the things they care about, which is in a sales example, how much money are they going to make? What's going to be the revenue? And having the say in the creation of the AI that affects them directly. Every decision they take, every time they move the slider, that information is going straight back to the data scientist, to the business owner, to the business analyst, who can see what was the end user preference, and that directly informs the process. Even when you're creating a model, we have a rapid prototyping capability where you can get end user preference immediately without having to do the integration fully into Salesforce, etc. So you can start getting feedback from people even during the model creation process. So we talked about various different personas, various different tools. Fundamentally, think of it this way. Aible data, by the way, Aible data is free for you to use. There's no charge for it. Aible data lets the data engineers load up a data and understand, is this data set even AI ready? And then it allows them to share that data set without giving access to the actual data. They're only giving the ability to train models on the data, not actual access to the data to business users and to data scientists. Now, typically, a data scientist would go through that model, create several models depending on different assumptions, but they often won't know the precise assumptions because the business users will know it. So they'll do some good enough assumptions like, hey, our average deal size is about 5 times higher than our cost of sales pursuit, or we approximately work on 50% of the deals that are in our pipeline. But then the business user can dial that in. And by the way, the decisions that the data scientist is taking is informing the AI that they chose, and that key driver, what is the AI learned, is communicated back to the business user. The business user can dial in their resourcing. How much marketing budget do I have? How much sales budget do I have? What are my assumptions? So they can dial in the assumption and resourcing information that the data scientist only had a high-level information on. And that now can be sent out, that the portfolio of models can be sent out to end users who can provide feedback on it, which is feeding back into that end user preference in Aible for Business and Aible Advanced. And finally, the impact delivered, which is the amount of money, what is the economic impact of this model? That is going to the CDO. And of course, these models are being monitored on over time as they make predictions, and we give the alerts and recommendations to executives, to data scientists. This is just one example of the alerting. The key point here is every one of these tools are designed for the unique needs and unique skills of the different members of your team. Because unless you do that, unless you allow every person to collaborate in the way that makes most sense for them, you cannot bring forward this big of a team. Think of it this way. When the PC revolution was at the level of the PC kit that experts had to assemble, the impact of the PC was so much smaller than when my 3-year-old daughter can use an iPad. That is the internet, when it was locked in the DARPANET for decades, and then the Mozilla browser comes out, the Netscape browser comes out, and all of a sudden, so many people start using it. You cannot do this unless you have simplified the product for those where it needs to be simple, but kept the power for those who need the power. And that's what Aible is focused on. Now, how does this play out in the real world? This is a case study from Charlie Merrow. You can actually see this case study on our website, and you can even watch a video of Charlie talking about this. But what was fundamentally important here was he was able to get to business impact really quickly. He found $3 million in additional sales leads. He was able to get data straight out of his CRM system. No special data cleansing, no special setup of the data, just the data as it was. And they were able to get the real job done. The job he needed to get done was optimization and resourcing. How do I make sure I have the right number of salespeople to have the highest total profit? That's what Charlie was able to get to. Now, what does the 3-week challenge look like? Now, the Charlie example you probably saw said 2 hours. Well, that's an exceptional case. He also had a simple use case. So sometimes it can be done really, really fast. But the realistic path to this is a 3-week challenge. We work with you throughout this process. It's done remotely. You can get started on it right now. On week 1, we identify what you're trying to do, what are the use cases. We have a whole portfolio of dozens of use cases already ready. You can start from them, or you can start with something you need that is different from it. We go in and work with your data, make sure it's good, do the AutoML that Mike was talking about, essentially automatically create a bunch of models, create a portfolio of models that would be optimal under different market conditions, deploy the models to Sandbox. You could deploy to a Salesforce Sandbox, for example, and see how this would actually work inside Salesforce, do that prediction integration, and actually start monitoring what happens if I make a prediction. Did it get it right? Did it not get it right? That entire cycle you can be done with in 3 weeks, and you should challenge us on that, and we'll walk you through it. The other part of this, and we mentioned this webinar before, and we're going to go to Q&A in a second. The other part of this is this world changing overnight. Like, we all know this. In fact, we really don't know what the next 3-4 weeks will bring. All we know is for the next 2 years, we are going to have times of economic uncertainty. And the issue in economic uncertainty is traditional AI will not work because it has to look at enough data to be able to get to useful predictions. So you'll have to wait a while until you get to a new normal, until your data scientists have been able to go in and retune all of your models and get to somewhere better. And just traditional manual processes are also not going to go very well because they're just going to go in and pull a big lever. I might go in and say, hey, I need to cut my cost by 25%. Let's peanut butter and jelly that across the organization to share the pain. But that might be completely the wrong thing to do. Maybe given the shifts in business assumptions, our mix of whether we should be focusing on upselling accounts, or whether we should be focusing on new accounts, or whether we should be focusing on replacement parts, that might change fundamentally. In marketing, whether we should be spending money on events versus how do we optimize between social media and AdWords, that will change fundamentally. So when we actually can take this combination of AI and mathematical optimization that Mike was talking about and that we showed you during the session today, when you take this ability to empower your existing workforce to quickly get ramped up and start contributing, that's when you can create this system for reacting to business change. We just didn't have time to cover that in detail today. This will happen in a week, and you're going to see a complete demo of what we are talking about in a sales use case, in a marketing use case. And feel free to contact us and use the Q&A also to provide suggestions to Jim so that we know what use cases you would like to see. Should we just go to general Q&A now, Jim? We have 7 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's great. So anyone, please use the app to write in questions. We have gotten some in already. So one of the questions we had for Mike and for Arijit, are these AIs ready to be used today, specifically for the use cases, propensity to buy, churn, and for fraud? Asking if they're ready or if there's something that needs to be built.
Mike, you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
So from my perspective,
can you hear me?
Absolutely yes, because AI can create value in these kind of use cases today. In fact, the best proof of that is the customer success stories. So when a business user can go in and find $3 million of value in their own sales data, that speaks more volumes than, hey, it's theoretical, it might work. The reason for these rapid cycles, the speed at which AI can be deployed today is precisely so that you don't have to sit there and think, will it work? You can actually figure out whether it's going to work in a matter of minutes and actually get to real value in a matter of weeks. Mike, please, you probably have a more unbiased view on this, but.
Well, no, I mean, this is why we're talking about all of the use cases. This is what enterprises are trying to do. They see enough success that they want to implement it. And they also understand the characteristic of machine learning, which is that just because you wished it worked doesn't necessarily mean it does, right? Because, again, this is a data-driven technology, and you need signal in that data. So a lot of companies that have been very challenged to implement it have picked one use case and then just kept going for it, not knowing when to quit, not knowing when to sort of admit that, well, maybe we don't have signal in this data. And that's why the most successful companies actually pick a basket of use cases and implement them simultaneously. And it's just as you're saying, it's like, well, your ability to cycle through those quickly to find the right candidates that are actually going to work makes the difference. Now, what the smartest companies do is they implement use cases that they see others have implemented successfully. And they know what data is likely to succeed in that use case. But nevertheless, the faster you can cycle through these, and it provides it's sort of an investment challenge. It's a new way of thinking for enterprises too, because generally you identify a use case for any technology, and you say, oh well, if we can do this, we'll save 80 million a year. AI is a little bit different because again, you need to make sure you need to test it first to make sure you have the right data. So companies are going to have to invest differently. They're going to have to say, okay, we're going to pick 6 use cases we think are going to work, more like a VC. A VC might invest in a dozen companies. They've done their due diligence. They believe every one of these companies is going to succeed, but they know statistically maybe 3 or 4 will be big hits. investing in AI use cases is very similar. The good news is that it's not like software development. It's not like you have to, develop 6 months worth of software. If you have the right tools, you can quickly analyze that data and understand what use cases are most likely to succeed.
And if I may add one thing to what Mike said about they often don't know when to quit, there's a very simple way to think about AI. Is it helping you do better than what you can do today? So if you start evaluating AI based on what are you doing today, and is the AI you're training based on your data helping you do better? If it is, you know what? Go deploy that AI. Start using it because you're going to learn more. You're going to learn more as you monitor. Over time, you're going to retrain and make that AI better. But knowing how to fail fast, how to succeed fast, knowing when to declare victory rather than keeping on iterating, it all comes down to, are you able to do better than what you're doing today if you adopted the AI that you have just developed? It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I'll just add that that's why business people should choose the use cases and not data scientists.
I couldn't agree
one
more.
More question. I think we've only got about 2 minutes left here, but someone was asking, how do they know if there's signal in their data to use for AI?
You want me to go? Mike, you go first, then I'll go.
Yeah, I'll go first. You run a model. You actually analyze it. That is exactly what machine learning does. Now there's some steps. The way it works is you have to hypothesize what data you think is relevant for that use case, and that hypothesis leads you to bring together a couple of different sources. And then there's a process that AutoML can do. Otherwise, a data scientist would have to do it, called feature engineering, which just think of it as enhancing those variables. But that's exactly the point of AutoML, is to be able to very quickly analyze that data to see if there's signal in it. But that's the way you know if there's signal in the data, is actually by trying to build a model.
And a perfect setup. We had not practiced this one. So Aible Data, that is literally what Aible Data is doing. When we said we are giving this thing for free to everyone called Aible Data, it is actually training a very lightweight model on the data to quickly figure out, is there enough signal in it to train an AI? And the reason it's important to train a model is you can find spurious correlations in your data very easily. So just because you find correlations in your data doesn't actually mean an AI can be trained on it. This is actually a place where a lot of BI people run into trouble, because they'll look at the data and try to find correlations. They're like, oh, this is correlation, let's go. Just try a very silly exercise. Take 100 random numbers and just start averaging 5 numbers together, and then try averaging 10 numbers together, and then try averaging 50 at a time. Guess what's going to happen? Correlation's going to keep going up, and then you're going to get a perfect correlation because there's a perfect line between 2 dots, right? So just because there are correlations doesn't mean you have a data set that's valid for AI training. And rather than forcing people to go through the entire AutoML process, we just gave for free basic AutoML in Aible for Data, which just runs without any intervention. And all it's doing is saying, do I see enough signal? But the second thing we do is we do benchmarking against other peers. That's going to take a little bit of time. But as people do this and use Aible, not Aible Data, we will know whether they were able to train a data set, train an AI that they deployed. And as long as they participate in the benchmark, we will then be able to show new users that 70% of customers who had a data set that looked just like yours were actually able to deploy an AI. That's going to come over time as people use, because Aible Data is literally getting launched today. So you guys are among the first people to find out about it. I know we are over time, Jim.
Very good.
Over to you.
Yes. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Orjit. Thanks, everyone, for joining. So if you want to take the 3-week challenge, you can go to our website and sign up there. And we hope you can join us for our webinar next week about the world has just changed and how to be prepared with AI. So thanks, everybody.